to Africa, where the take shape, thought find out, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest, empowering leaders, transforming organizations, one of his advocacy, and other than Mr. Michael Wright. Welcome, Mr. Michael on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Again, my name is Michael Wright. I have spent a lot of time in school, getting a lot of education, a lot of experience. I started a consulting business in 2015. Through that process, talking to different business owners and organizational leaders, I noticed that there were some key things that they were either not aware that they were missing or weren't connecting all of the pieces together when it came to what they believed in and what they were taught. And because of that, their organization wasn't running smoothly. There wasn't systems and processes in place. And so I helped them out and let them get things back on track.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Michael. Thank you. And today let's talk about building healthy leadership systems without compromising biblical values. So tell us the core tension. At its heart, the topic about integrating two worlds. What is the fundamental tension between modern organizational best practices and timeless biblical values that leaders must navigate?
I think one of the core biblical values goes back to the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yes,
When
certainly.
when you're in a leadership position and you are treating people based off of your title as opposed to leading them with kindness and respect and compassion, you get two totally different results. I have been with organizations where the leadership was constantly saying, I'm the boss, I'm the manager, do what I say. And there was a lot of hypocrisy there, and it made the work environment and the culture very toxic. The only reason why people stayed is because they had families to support. When you are an employee and you're making a phone call to set up a doctor's appointment for your son, and your boss looks at you and says, make those phone calls on your personal time, not at work, do it at lunch, whatever, in a very bossy tone. She then turns around right after she says that to him. She gets on the phone and starts making travel arrangements for her son's baseball team. And this is a woman who proclaims that, she lives by biblical teachings, but there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. And when she made that statement, the employee that she made it to, you could see the anger on his face. And that's one of the things that I try to teach leaders not to do. If you are not going to allow your employees to do something, then you yourself should not do it either. One thing I say in my book is leadership isn't about the title; it's about the influence. And if you look at specifically the life of Jesus,
Hmm.
he did not give himself a title. He treated people with fairness, kindness, compassion, changed cultures. You know, with his disciples, he mentored them, he engaged with them, he corrected them. But look at the influence he had on the world, not only then, but now. And as a leader, we're never going to get there, right? Like 2,000 years from now, people aren't going to know who I am. People aren't going to read my books. They're not going to watch my videos. They're not going to listen to my podcast. But if they can remember me 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and with the people I've led and the people I've coached, then I think I did a pretty good job.
Hmm. Yes, definitely. You did a good job building your legacy. Mr. Michael, beyond integrity, integrity is a given. What are the two or three less obvious but equally critical biblical values that must be engineered into a leadership system's processes, not just a mission statement?
Transparency,
Yes,
and
please.
it goes hand in hand with integrity, but honesty. And the third thing I would say, probably paramount for to anything else, is you have a set of values, you have a set of morals, and those should be unwavering all the time for any reason, whether someone is watching you or not. One of the biggest compliments I've ever given was I was ever given, and one of them was just recently. But a few years ago, my office was next door to a mortgage broker, and a guy came into my office wanting me to help him with something with some financial matters, and was willing to pay me a lot of money. But what he wanted me to do goes against what I believe in, and I told him no. And the gentleman across the hall from me, he comes over, he says to me that, you know, Michael, I have to commend you for standing up for what you believe in and never wavering from that, even if it's going to cost you. Most recently, I was told that my ability to stay calm under any circumstances, under any pressure, means a lot to the people that I work with now and to the environment and the culture that we're trying to promote there. But that calmness comes from what I believe in. That calmness comes from what I stand for. It comes from, do the right thing all the time. And if you make a mistake, own up to it, be transparent about it. Um, and I think if you can do that, if you can be transparent and open and honest with people and not waver from what you believe in, I think you're on the right path.
You are in the right path for sure. So, Mr. Michael, Jesus as the CEO, if we're to model our leadership system explicitly on Jesus' method with his disciples, what would be the most disruptive change to our typical corporate structures, meetings, and performance reviews?
Sometimes I think we need to change our reviews and not be so financially motivated. Um, I don't think that sometimes the focus needs to be necessarily on money. I think sometimes it needs to be on how many people have we helped, how many people have we impacted, how many people have we made a positive impact in their life. And that was my business model. For me, it was never, it caused a little bit of debate and argument and disagreements with people that was in my circle of friends, I guess. Um, they're like, Michael, you have all this experience and all this knowledge. You're just not charging people, you're not charging people what you're worth. And I told them it's not about the money. It's a little bit about the money because I have a family I have to support. But for me, it was always about the amount of people that I was helping. Um, in 2021, I was presented the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Medal because at that point, in 6 years, I had accumulated 9,000 hours of volunteer service, all doing financial work that I could have charged money for, or I could have turned them away because they couldn't afford to pay for it. but they needed the help and I could provide it. And that goes back to, the parable of the Good Samaritan. If someone has a need that you can fill, then you fill that need and you move on.
Yes.
I think sometimes the reviews need to go both ways. If you're going to review me as an employee, maybe I should get to review you as a leader, right? Um, I think with some reviews, maybe they focus too much on the negative and hardly ever touch on what you're doing right or, how you're making the organization work better. So I just think that sometimes it just needs to be overdone. When I had my business up and running, my first business, my employee reviews were never really about what they were doing wrong. It was always about the progress that they were making, and it was always centered around the growth that they were exhibiting as employees. To me, that matters more. If you're growing in your position, that means more to me than you making a mistake.
Mr. Michael, the success dilemma. How do you define healthy and successful for a leadership system when biblical values might prioritize faithfulness, discipline making, or community health over pure growth or profit metrics?
I have often said for me, and this is something that I try to instill in other leaders, is I define success. Did I make an impact today? Did I leave the organization I'm with today a little bit better than I found it yesterday? Did I do my best to exhibit the faith that I have without being overt about it? Did I recognize someone that is showing improvement? Did I mentor someone along the way? Again, for me, it comes back to just helping other people, not, did I work? I don't consider being successful working 20 hours a day. I don't really consider successful being, you know, making millions and millions of dollars. If that's the route that you've taken and that's what you've accomplished, then I'll give you a pat on the back. But sometimes I think, and I learned this the hard way, I think we need to define success for ourselves and not let someone else tell us what we need to do to be successful. I think it's individualized at the individual level and at an organizational level.
Mr. Michael, on practical systems and process, the hiring blueprint. How does a biblical anchored hiring process look different? What questions do you ask and what traits do you prioritize beyond skills and cultural fit?
For me, I prioritize the willingness to learn and grow. It is extremely difficult to lead someone that is not willing to learn. There have been times where, you could work in the same industry. For example, I have a finance background. So I could work for one company in their finance department and do things the way that they do it there. When I leave there and go to a new organization, it doesn't necessarily mean that they do it the same way. The principles and concepts are the same, but again, each organization is different. So there's different nuances that go along with each position. That's one of the things I look for is someone willing to learn. The other thing I look for is yes, they have to have the skill sets that I'm looking for. There has to be a cultural fit, but are they humble? Are they willing to own up to a mistake that they've made? I've told my employees on interviews, I expect you to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But I also expect you to look at those mistakes as a learning situation. If we make a mistake and we learn from it, I call that a lesson. It's when you make a mistake, don't own up to it. I have to go behind you and fix it, and you don't do anything about it. Um, Also, I look at, are they willing to serve the greater picture? the bigger picture? Are they willing to understand it and grasp it? One example would be I'll never forget, it was the first person I ever hired. She was right out of school. And I told her on the interview, I said, look, I'm going to hire you to do the job that I need you to do now, but I'm also going to hire you to do my job. The thought process behind that is if she can do my job, I know she can do hers. But not only that, if she can do even 50% of my role as a fractional CFO, that gives me time to continue to grow the business and continue to serve other people, more people. I think sometimes we need to implement that as leaders when we're hiring, find candidates that would be willing to step up, that we can mentor to do maybe not all of our job, but a portion of it to allow us to focus on bigger picture vision and mission motivated tasks.
So, Mr. Michael, the conflict and accountability. Biblical values call for grace and forgiveness, yet healthy systems require clear accountability. How do you design a disciplinary or performance management process that reflects both truth and grace?
I think as leaders, we need to acknowledge the performance, right? We need to acknowledge that, okay, there's something lacking here. Something's going on. What happened, right? And I'll give you an example that happened to me. I was working with an organization. As a matter of fact, it was a church,
Mm.
and I was out of work. The agreement was I would be at their location on site 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. And I was having trouble with my car. It was the anniversary of my daughter's death, and I sunk into this depression, and I didn't want to do anything. And and ironically enough, when it came time for my evaluation, there was a lot of negative remarks. And so I made the comment to them, the same skills I had when you hired me are the same skills I have a year later. But I asked the pastor of the church, I said, did anybody stop to ask what was going on? Why
Mm.
would I be at the top of my game for 9 months and then all of a sudden really not care if I'm doing the job or not for a week or two, and then go back to doing it the same way I was doing it when you hired me? Nobody thought to ask. If they would have asked, they would have maybe understood. I don't think anybody consistently has poor job performance without a reason. I had a pastor call me up and he asked me, hey, can you come by my office? So I go to his office and he tells me quite frankly, he goes, Michael, my staff is lazy. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean lazy? And he says they're not doing their jobs. So, I said, this is going to hurt. And I know it's going to hurt, but as their leader, that's your fault. I said, let me explain. I said, I know you're a pastor and I know you know it. I know you read it. You've probably taught on it. But what does the parable and it comes back to the parable of the Good Samaritan. How does that apply to you in a leadership position? And he said, he goes, I don't know. So I told him, I said, at the core of that parable is you meet the needs of others. So what needs do your employees have? Do they need better equipment? Do they need a better understanding of their job? Do they need clearer expectations? Do they need to be taught different? Are they in the right position to begin with? And about a month later, he called me up and he went back to his church, gathered up his staff, had a meeting with them, and an open, honest discussion with them and made some changes and shifted people around and are doing fine to this day. And I think sometimes as leaders, when there's poor job performance, we should find out why and not be the one and not just dismiss them, right? In the parable of the lost sheep, and I talk about that in my book a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The parable is Jesus goes after, he leaves the 99 to go after the one. And sometimes I think as leaders, we are quick to dismiss the one. And I think the one should be the one that we spend more time with. If you have 100 employees and one of them is slacking for whatever reason, then you spend more time with the one to find out why and not be so quick to just dismiss them.
Mr. Michael, as empowering leaders, transforming organizations, what are your short term and long term goals?
My short-term goals is to keep up with the people I have, reconnect with some others, impact one person at a time, one organization at a time. And long-term goals is to eventually do this on a lot larger scale than what I am now and go from someone that's relatively local to, I don't know, international, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Good
I may
luck to
never
you.
get there, but that's a goal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. That's the goal. Good luck to your goals, Mr. Michael, and looking forward
Thank
for
you.
more success. So, what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Oh, I actually had someone tell me that one time. They're like, I want to be like you, Pastor Mike. And I'm like, no, no, you don't. No, you
No, you
don't.
don't.
Be who you are, right? Maybe take something I've taught you, implement it. But if you want to be like me, okay, do the work. Spend the time in school, get the experience, get the education, get the knowledge, surround yourself with people that will help you get there. I don't think anybody wakes up one day and says, I want to do this, and the next day they're there. They have to put in the work. And I know people that have wanted to be a success
Hmm.
and took a lot of shortcuts. And when they became successful and they had a business that was making three, four, $500,000 a year, they didn't know how to run it. And within a year, it was shut down. So put in the work.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that advice, Mr. Michael. And can you
You're welcome.
please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Say again.
Can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
One book that really impacted my journey, and it's written for pastoral staff, but I think it applies to anybody in a leadership position. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Leading from the Second Chair. And basically, what it's about is how to be a leader without being the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I actually read it twice. I read it once from the perspective of someone who is not the leader, but they are a leader, and it was required reading for all of my staff. And then I read it the second time from the viewpoint of the leader and how could I help the people that I was leading that were in leadership positions do their jobs better.
Well, thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Michael. Thank you, thank you. So, for a leader inheriting or trying to reform an existing unhealthy system, what is the first most critical system or policy to change to begin a shift toward a biblical health?
I think the first policy to change is, well, before you make any policy changes, I think you have to take a really hard look at the people and the culture and how they're treated. And then maybe make changes at the top on how people are hired. But I think the second policy or procedure that would probably need to change would be benefits, right? And I'm not talking about paying, ungodly amounts for health insurance and stuff like that, but definitely, we need to, and I think this country has gotten to a point where it's starting to change up a little bit, but there was people saying, if I'm a leader and I call one of my employees at 2 o'clock in the morning, I expect them to answer the phone. Look, you call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, unless someone's dead, I ain't answering the phone. And if I do answer it, I ain't talking to you about work, right? But I think we need to take a look from the top down and put policies and procedures in place where our employees know that they are in a safe place, that they can be, they can come talk to us and show vulnerability. We can show compassion and that we can be vulnerable with them without repercussion.
Well, to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Michael, if you had to choose one question for a leader to consistently ask themselves to ensure their system are not compromising biblical values, what would that question be? Yeah.
Why are you here?
Why are you here? Yes,
And
definitely.
I will explain that just very briefly. I tell people to remember their why. Um, I didn't start this business to get rich. I didn't start coaching to get rich. I had a purpose. I had a vision. And as long as I remember what that mission and what that vision is, that's my why. And that's what keeps me grounded. I know people that started businesses, nonprofit organizations, whatever, and lost track of their why. And the next thing you know, what they have created did not match what they started. And it was almost impossible to make that switch. Never forget your why.
Hmm. Don't forget your why, people. That's very important. Why I'm here. Thank you so much, Mr. Michael, for
You are more
sharing
than
your.
welcome. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, likewise. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Well, if you go to my website, it's drmwright.com. There you will find all of my social media stuff, my podcast, my YouTube channel, and a couple of books that I just published. The actually the one of the books that is up there is a practical guide to Christian leadership. Some of that stuff we talked about today. Other than that, just keep me in your thoughts, and I will do the same.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Michael Wright, because if you support him, for sure more and more advocacy like this will rise. So, Mr. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Welcome, people. See you soon.